let's just carry on. Let's just start to see, wait a minute, I'm just going to be recording this. Yeah, let's just start. Just see if there's any questions or observations that have arisen for anyone over the lunch break. We could just, do that and then move into the next thing.
Yes, I guess I would like to ask, doing a Dhyana practice as a whole is I guess I find it very useful what we have been going through, but is it? I have difficulty in placing it. Is it so that the Dhyana practice is something that we actually do always alongside when we meditate, and we kind of bring it into the frame of the metta bhavana and the mindfulness of breathing? Or is it something that we specifically do when we, for instance, have a more open sit?
Yeah.
Or yes, if you can say something about that, please.
Well, in a way, it's completely up to you how much you want to emphasize dhyana practice. But it has to be said that in day-to-day practice, it's more realistic to just look at getting into access. And from access, you can go into whatever practice you want to do, with more sense of presence, really being there. I mean, whether that's mindfulness or insight practice, or going into the dhyanas, whatever it is, or just sitting. If you've established access, then you're in a better position altogether. So that's one thing to bear in mind. I mean, to be honest, I've explored the dhyanas, mainly in the sense of what I'm calling, or using the term soft dhyana. But it's not a big part of my practice. Most of my practice is aimed at formless meditation and inquiry, in other words, insight practice. So, I find I have the facility, having developed that I can get into at least soft dhyana quite readily if I choose to do so. But it's not particularly where I mostly go. I know the territory, but I don't tend to go there awfully much. At the same time, when you're style, hold on, just gonna I'm just gonna mute everybody because I can hear some extraneous talking. So Natasha, you can unmute yourself. So dhyana is a natural state, and it can naturally arise when you're doing a practice. And you can certainly, both the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana can be used as a basis for dhyana. As well as, in mindfulness of breathing, you can do it as a mindfulness practice oriented more towards insight, or you can do it as a dhyana oriented practice. So, it's, there's quite a lot of possibilities there, basically.
Tejananda.
Hello.
Could you say a little bit, apologies if I missed this, if you said it before lunch, because I do sometimes miss things, but if the difference between doing the Arupa jhana practices as jhana practices and as without the sort of strong samadhi element, what's the difference in terms of what we're going towards or exploring?
Well, I think you'd probably have to ask Cornelio for a definitive view on that, but what he seemed to be saying, and this does correspond with my own experience, is that you can get a sense of boundless space quite readily without being much beyond access. And he seemed to be implying that, you know, there's a, well, let's say there's a state in which you can be fully immersed in any of the dhyanas, and that would be dhyana properly. In other words, there would be a certain level of samadhi, you know, dialing it up to at least 5 or 6, so to speak, for it to be called a dhyana. But you can get a sense of boundless space without being much more absorbed than access.
And I mean, I could sort of feel the value, that there's a value in it, but is there a specific value, or is that what you're saying I'd need to ask an alio or read an alio?
Well, there is a specific value insofar as he's saying that you don't need to get into the full dhyana in order to use it as a basis for insight in terms of the insight progress in the shorter Shunyata Sutta. Yeah. So it's like you can actually get sufficient sense of this and some of the other formless dhyanas without necessarily, the formless spheres, without necessarily being in a deep dhyanic state.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else got a point?
Tejananda?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember actually at Vajraloka a few years ago, Prakasha was giving a retreat, and he was quite keen, I remember, on emphasizing that it was what he felt it was quite useful, quite well worth practice to even sort of walk into the country lane and just start to practice infinite space, infinite consciousness there, while not even being in meditation. I tried that a bit, and I did find it quite, yeah, it certainly did change your perception somewhat. So it's interesting that you can do these at all these different levels, right into deep dhyana, obviously. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the difference. You can do it in a low samadhi state or a high samadhi state, and you know, if you've just got a sense of how to enter into any of those spheres, including the rupa dhyanas, then you can get a sense of it quite readily. So, I mean, I think making this distinction between the level of samadhi and the factors, if you like, of a particular dhyana state is useful. Even, you know, it means probably that in daily practice, you can get a sense of dhyana, you know, pretty easily. You know, as I say, at least if you're in access. You know, if you're not in access, then you do have to do whatever you need to do to get into access. But once the hindrances have dropped away, you can probably get a sense of a kind of a soft dhyana quite readily, and you know that will feed into the practice and inform any insight practice that you're doing. And then the insight practice, as you probably realize, informs the shamatha, and you know, so they kind of build up on each other.
So, Andy, in the last practice, I experienced like bodily sensations without boundary. I couldn't define them as being attributed to particular parts of body, unless actually like it engaged my conceptual mind.
Yeah.
And similarly, I was aware of bird song, probably coming from your microphone, and but there didn't seem to even be a clear distinction between my bodily experience and the bird song. And when meditation ended and I opened my eyes, I became aware of my image in the little tile on the screen, and it just sort of bore no resemblance. I couldn't really equate it with what I just experienced. And bearing that in mind, just what I've tried to describe, does that sort of fall into any of the formless dhyanas? Because otherwise I can't really conceptualize where they might begin.
Well, they begin, I mean, in a sense, by what we were doing before lunch, in sort of opening to a sense of space. And you know, I'm suggesting that we do it somatically. Yeah, which I found to be a useful way in. But there are other ways in, which I'll mention when we get on to the actual, into going into the sphere of boundless space, which we'll do after a settling down meditation. So probably a lot of your questions will be addressed then, but you can always ask more if you need to.
Okay, thanks.
Any more? Okay, so let's just do a shortish, getting back into access type meditation. I'm hoping everyone is having at least some experience of access. So as usual, basic comfortable posture, and then just sit. So just with a sense of how it is right now with mind and body, bring the awareness into these sensations of grounding. And sensing the spacious, energetic earth beneath. Using the breathing up, if you wish to get a sense of lift, or using the sky cord, if you prefer. You could even use both if you want to. Belt and braces. And as you're doing that, check the alignment of the head, and the general alignment or balance of the body, finding poise. And then scanning through and releasing whatever holdings you can. And then come back to just sitting with a sense of the whole somatic cloud, the whole body, including the breathing sensations. So how is it now? Are you in access? Are the hindrances inactive or are they active? So just discern or intuit directly what you need to do for the next several minutes just to consolidate some samadhi. So I suggest you don't attempt to go into any dhyana just yet, but just stay in basic presence, in access. So we're looking for presence in the aspect of experience we're focusing on, but keeping a light touch and using the minimal possible effort. Okay, now if you're on a more focused area of the soma, sort of zoom out to the whole cloud of sensations of the body. And just be the breathing body. And then bring awareness to the sense of space or dimension that these body sensations inhabit. So explore with awareness the quality, the various qualities of the sensations. See to what extent you can get a sense of them as being energetic, vibrational, and alive. And as I mentioned this morning, we have a kind of view of what these sensations mean, what they indicate. For instance, the sensations of weight or pressure, where we're in contact with the floor on cushion. And there are sensations associated with contact with the clothing. And so forth. So we can mentally label them in that way. For instance, in your mouth, you may have sensations of wetness that you identify as wetness. So we're dealing with our bodily experience of the elements in a way. We've got earth in the sense of resistance, pressure, water, heat, fire, and sensations of air. But if you let go of those labels, we're coming more into here of the bark garment territory, in the scene, just the scene, in here, in particular, in the sensed, just what is sensed, just what these sensations are, without the mental labeling, without the assumption. So, for instance, are the sensations themselves light or heavy? Can you weigh a sensation? So we could say that the sensations themselves are just different qualities of vibrating energy. And they're arrayed, so to speak, in this sense of somatic space. And where the sensations fade out at the edges of our somatic cloud, there's still a sense of no boundary to the somatic space. So check that out, don't take my word for it. Check your own experience. Maybe perceiving it in this way, the whole body and even the mind seems much more fluid, in a way much lighter, much easier. Even if there's pain present, overall, the sense of it is quite different. Okay, now don't focus so much on the sensations. Focus on the sense of space, somatic space. Sense that it has no separate inside and outside. It's just space. And then notice that sounds are also arising in this space. And if you want to, you can go on to get a sense that all of the sense spheres are arising in this sense of space. We're still embodied. It's just that our sense of the body may be rather different than usual. You could say it's a more subtle body, or a more subtle experience of the body. So now just let go of doing anything in particular, or looking at anything in particular, and just sit. Relax out of any effort. Okay, so we've got a basis there for one way into the first arupa sphere. I won't say dhyana, but at least into the sphere. And it should be pretty obvious that this way in would be just to have a sense of the space, the somatic space, just being boundless and in a sense extending more and more. So that's it's an embodied way in, but at the same time you're not emphasizing the body, you're emphasizing the sense of space. Yeah, you're not emphasizing the sensations. And what I was pointing to in that one with regard to the sensations should give a sense of them being much more kind of light and subtle than they normally might seem. Yeah, so that's one way in which the actual somatic energy kind of can go into the background and the sense of space comes into the foreground. So that's that way in which I'm going to lead into when we come to do it. But there are other ways. There are other ways of doing it. And again, you can find quite a few hints in Lee Bressington's book. And actually, some of them are more imaginative. Yeah, it's actually using the imagination to get a sense of space extending. And the recommendation that he makes is that you just extend it in one direction. So you could do this somatically or you can do it imaginatively. In fact, I'll lead into one way of doing it, which is kind of, it involves the breath, but it also involves the imagination, which can be helpful. But the main thing is just to get a sense of space. And the idea is that we just steadily expand it in one direction. It could be forward or upwards or downwards even, but probably forwards and a bit upwards. And we just feel that it's extending and extending and extending without finding any limits. And at some point, there's just a sense of space, just a big space. Now, it may be that there's a sense also of I'm here in this space, which is fine. So it's like there is still a sense of, if you like, a center to that space. But it's more a question of getting a sense of space by any means. And with the somatic method, I find it much easier to extend it in all directions, like a sphere. But if you're doing it more imaginatively, it might be more helpful to do it in one direction. Anyway, the main thing is that at some point, it just becomes a big boundless space. And there it is. That's the first arupa. So that's, if you like, the theory. There's not much to it in a sense. But any observations from that last practice or any questions about getting into the first arupa?
I have a question. I'm not sure it's exactly what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Often my experience is of the body disappearing altogether and any sense of a me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's happening then.
You're not sure what's happening? Well,
I mean, it's quite pleasant, but it's quite pleasant, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is one of the things that can happen. It's like the sense of the body and the me can drop away completely. So that's something to watch out for. I mean, you talking to everybody, don't necessarily expect that you'll have that kind of experience straight away. It might come. And I think that kind of experience, especially in terms of the absence of a me, does depend on some insight into the what the me is. Yeah. So, or let's say that insight is more efficacious. I mean, I know I've certainly heard of people who've had sudden and quite unexpected experiences of just that. It's just like no me, no body, no nothing, and it comes out of nowhere, and it's like, what's going on here? Yeah,
it's my most common experience when I meditate now.
Yeah,
not every time, but often.
Oh, good. Well, good for you, I say.
But is there somewhere else I could go with that?
Is there somewhere else?
Or I can ask you separately if you're on.
Yeah. I mean, there is, but it would be more. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be quite the area we're going into today.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Any other points, questions, observations?
I don't know. I guess it's also for me. It might be that in the afternoon is always a little bit more challenging for me after lunch. So I don't. I think I feel a bit. I feel a bit. Yeah. Perhaps I'm entering into some sleep state or something. So so that's not where we're wanting to go.
No, it's not.
So
but
I just tend to get back to the access concentration, just to back to the breath and and trying to uplift myself a little bit.
Yeah, that's all good. Yeah. So as I said yesterday, I mean, that is it's like that for a lot of people at this time of day, and well, that's just what we're dealing with. But at least you can come back to this when you're brighter and more awake from the recording.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, any more?
I don't know if this is what we're going to be moving on to, but I certainly didn't experience the somatic, my somatic experiences weren't boundless. It was more a case of having the absence of boundary. Because for me, boundless, it sort of implies the infinite, and I had it wasn't an expansive sense, nor was it contained. I found your metaphor of a cloud most appropriate, in that it's like being in a cloud of experience, and you can't see where the boundaries are.
Yeah.
So you're not really aware of any direction. But it wasn't actually like being in a dense fog either. It had quite a clarity about it as well. It was actually rather pleasant, rather than being sort of scary and disorientating.
Yeah, well, that's good. So I use the term boundless to mean precisely you can't find bounds. Yeah, so it's the same as unbounded. Yeah, it's just that you can't find any boundaries. And I would use infinite, although they essentially mean the same thing. Infinite would mean actually an experience somehow of infinity. Yeah, whatever that might mean. And I don't know what it would mean. So what we're looking for here is a sense of boundlessness. And as I said, when it comes into view, so to speak, it's just a sense of a big space without any evident bounds. But it's not like you can say it's is it 1 billion miles long, or is it 100 billion miles long? That just doesn't apply. It's just boundless. Yeah. So we're not attempting to go to infinity and beyond, just to boundlessness.
Tejananda.
Yeah.
Devi. And I'm just remembering now, Nalio talks about with the boundlessness initially, just to go beyond the sense of the body, that in itself sort of counts as sort of boundlessness, and over time one can go further and extend it. But I found that sort of helpful in a way, to not get into sort of mentally trying in a certain way.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point, because which is what we've been doing. Even to get a sense that the space goes beyond, or let's say the space infuses both the body and the beyond, is already a sense of boundlessness. So yeah, if you've got that far, you've already succeeded. So ace. Anyway, let's explore it in a couple more. Well, let's do it in one more way, because I can feel a short break coming on after that. But we'll explore it somatically first. Okay. So just settle. And then check in with the grounding, lift, poise, alignment. And releasing. And then just inhabit the whole space of the soma straight away. And the sensations are there in that space. So sense them as just vibrations without any weight or heaviness or lightness, just sensations. And then the space itself, somatic space. First of all, sense it, so to speak, within the cloud, or up to the edges of the cloud, the fuzzy edges of the cloud, so to speak. And then beyond, there's no perceivable boundary at the fuzzy edge of the somatic cloud. So try letting your awareness go out in a sphere, so to speak, in all directions. See if you can just get a sense of going out and out and not finding any edges or bounds. And if you don't find it easy to do it as a sphere, you can just do it in one direction, or even just in a hemisphere. So there's a sense of it getting larger and larger, so to speak. But there's still no sense of any boundary. In fact, it's pretty evident experientially that there is no boundary to be found. However far it extends. You may find that the sense of the soma, the actual energetic body, becomes fainter and fainter. Having said that, I've just brought your attention back to it, but just re-engage with the expansion. Okay, and then just let it be a big space. Don't continue to get a sense of expanding. It's enough to be clear that there are no bounds to be found. And then re-engage with the somatic cloud, just as it is, and other sense experiences happening. Just have a 5-minute or so break. So coming back at 25 past. reflections on that last practice that we just did?
Yeah, Akasha Raja here. I found that a bit of an abstraction. So I felt that, I mean, I certainly got a kind of direct felt sense of the sort of blurry edges of the cloud of soma, as it were, but the sort of sense of trying to sort of push that outwards, you know, in a sphere. It sort of became a bit of an idea. And I found myself trying to sort of work with an idea rather than with experience.
Yeah.
And it's when it kind of didn't really, I found I couldn't really engage with that on that level. So I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it seems that some of the ways into boundless space are, in a sense, they are an idea. You know, you're using the imagination. So, but I mean, that doesn't work for everybody. So, you know, bearing in mind, you know, what Vijay Devi said, you know, just having a sense of no bounds to your actually experienced somatic space could be enough, you know, to give you a sense of that spaciousness. Sorry, Vajra Devi. Yeah, so, you know, I think that would work for you better than, you know, trying to get a sense of extending it, except just to notice that it is literally boundless. In other words, you can impute that as far as you went, you wouldn't find any bounds. It just is by nature unbounded. Yeah, and that could be enough just to rest in that sphere, so to speak.
So what I find interesting to play with in that kind of awareness is that there are no dimensions. Dimensions become meaningless when you're kind of really involved in the soma in that way.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an approach that works better.
That's good. I mean, in a sense, also that's more of an insight approach. It's bringing an insight aspect into it, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any experience to recount?
Hello. Yes.
Hi.
Prasada Deepa here. Hi. I just it's not necessarily about that specifically, but just generally. Sometimes when I start meditating, it's almost if I drop down into it, I get this sudden sort of jerky kind of thing happens to my body, sort of involuntary kind of thing. I'm not too bothered about it, but except that you're just sort of, it's almost as if you drop down, as if something's letting go, but it kind of slightly disturbing. Yeah,
I get that too. And I mean, it depends on the degree and amount of it that you get, but you know, if it's extreme, it can be disturbing. But you know, for me, it's, I mean, it happened towards just when I told everybody else to let go. It happened in my own body, and it's just like it. You know, it's if you don't make it into an issue, yeah, it doesn't need to be one. It's just like, oh, yeah, the body's releasing some. You know, it's just like an energy release, really. You know, pretty related.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I wasn't enormously bothered about it, but as there's an opportunity just to ask, and I've never had an opportunity before, it seems a good idea.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
Checking out. Yeah, because I mean that could be the case for just about anybody, and it's worth knowing that. Yeah, it's no big deal, really.
Thank you.
Any more?
Yes, I've got one question. Would be about coming back down to earth. I mean, that's to say, I've got no. I mean, it's a great feeling to have this sense of infinity, I would call it. But I need very much to come back to earth, very clear, have a very clear route back, and partly because there's a little argument in my mind about whether it really is infinite. I mean, do we know? And I remember, and I haven't been in studying Buddhism for very long, but the very first image was one of the sea, and that the Buddha actually had never seen the sea, but he could imagine going down into it. The imagination was of going deeper through going into the sea.
Right.
But I don't find that this image of going into space, which is really the imagination of our times, it doesn't kind of, because it's not got an idea of going anywhere, it just doesn't have that. I mean, you know, the fact that there isn't any edge doesn't have any meaning to me. That's all.
Well, in a sense, it's not about meaning, it's about experience. I mean,
but like Akasaraja said, I mean, I rather felt that too. I can't experience it.
Yeah.
I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's lots of spatial, you know, lots of talk about, but I can't experience, or I'm refusing to experience. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, it's not something, you know, to expect to get an experience of it in full, almost the first time you try is, you know, is a bit, you know, a bit much. You know, so if you have got a sense of somatic space, a sense of, you know, not being able to find any boundaries to the soma, the cloud of sensations, and, you know, not being able to find any boundaries beyond that, that is sufficient. Yeah. So it's just coming into an aspect of our actual experience, which we're normally not aware of. You know, and yeah, there are more things. Yeah, there are more things we can do with it, so to speak. But you know,
good.
It's just a possible meditative object of a more subtle kind. Yeah.
I think I can relate to that, what Susan was just saying about refusing to go there. I just so much want to keep my feet on the ground.
Yeah.
I've basically been refusing all weekend
to
go there. And finding my way with that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just I think that that's the reason for me as well, because I don't want to leave the ground.
Well, I mean, maybe that's appropriate for you at the moment. You know, so you know, if you feel if it feels wrong to your being, don't go there. You know, it's just like, well, you know, you've got the basic practices of embodiment; those are really helpful. You know, so be embodied, and you know, work with awareness of the breath, work with the metta. You know, you might find some of the aspects of insight can be useful as well.
Yeah.
So just like, I think for everybody, there comes there's like an edge to our practice where it's like, that's enough. Yeah. And then you can push a little bit beyond that edge, but no further. It's just like pushing the boundary slightly, but you know, having a sense of as it were, the comfort zone as well.
Yeah, and that awareness of saying, okay, I'm still refusing to go there, and then just being really nice to myself about the fact I'm refusing has been a really good thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's being, well, it's not even refusing, it's just knowing what's appropriate for you.
That's it. Yeah.
And that is metta.
Thank you.
Okay.
This may change.
Sorry?
This may change.
Oh yes, it will. It will change. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there because this is very new to me, I'm just experiencing, is there a kind of like an ethical dimension to this? Because as I experienced just very subtly, and also struggling, but very subtle experience of with a sound that suddenly it could be inside of me, or I could be in a different relationship to with the suggestion of opening up. I feel it also is a suggestion of a different relationship to everything, as born of an embodied.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, it is. That's what we're getting at. It is having a different relationship with everything, and with what we are. Ultimately, the Dharma is pointing to the truth that fundamentally we aren't what we think we are. We're something far better than that, actually. You could say, well, ultimately we're all Buddhas. So we aren't what we think we are, and that does have ethics is involved in the whole thing. But one way of looking at it is particularly with regard to insight practice, and these arupa spheres are very opening to that, you could say. If we have time, we'll go into this a bit more explicitly towards the end. But it's just like we're opening to see through the fundamental causes of what we call unethical behavior. The fundamental causes are the afflictions, the kleshas, aversion, craving, delusion, all that lot. So it's like they're arising from the nature of our holding to a view of a separate self. So I mean, that you could say that the ethical implications run all through it.
And I had a little. I just found it coming up in the experience, maybe also with this thing with it's a borderline with also using the imagination, that suddenly when I imagine or I managed to get a little bit beyond the space of the body, then the room became an issue for me. Oh no, the room feels so solid around me. How can I imagine anything beyond that? That was quite interesting just to notice that.
Well, all of that can be explored, but just push your boundlessness as far as it will go. Sort of happily, as it were.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened for me was I was getting a spaciousness, and then a thought arose which was, so what's the point of this? And then the next thought arose was, well, where's the heart? And with that, the spaciousness hadn't gone, but there was, dare I say, some meaning in it, or I stay with that then. With of heart.
With the heart, yeah. Well, that's a good discovery. The heart is always there, here. We're not necessarily focusing on it all the time. I suppose if somebody was doing abstract reasoning or sort of extreme mathematical sports, they wouldn't be particularly focused on the heart, but it's like it's there, and it does kind of infuse all of our experience. So I mean, we're dealing with this sense of space just as boundlessness, but this it does have an effect on the heart and our whole way of being. So all of these things that they're different approaches. And by the way, I mean, it's not that these approaches are compulsory in the Dharma. You can become awakened without ever going into boundless space and so forth. But it's just like, well, we're choosing to explore them because they are part of the Buddha's teaching, and many people have found them really, really helpful. And the further we go into this, which we won't have time to go as far as we possibly could, but the further you go into it, the more these practices do really become insight practices. Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll just do another short one. I said I had another one for getting a sense of boundless space. This one is unapologetically imaginative, although it does use the breath. And it comes from Mahamudra, actually. It's quite simple. And what it is, I'll just describe it before we do it. We can do it fairly briefly. Is that you get a sense that on breathing out, your breath goes out directly in front of you, and your awareness kind of goes with the breath. So it starts going out on the out breath. On the in breath, you just ignore it, but it keeps on going out and out and out, further and further away. And as it goes, it gathers speed. And it just gathers speed until it's going at, if you like, at an infinite rate. So your awareness is going out with the breath at an infinite rate of a boundless speed, whatever that might mean, and it goes completely beyond the edge of everything. And I'll bring in a visual metaphor at that point, which can have a sense of propelling you into boundless space. Okay, so let's give this one a go. So just settle in, just set up those aspects of posture. And then come into the overall sense of the somatic body. Now bring the awareness to the sense of the out breaths in particular as they come out of the nose. And then just imagine that your awareness is riding on the out breath, going straight out in front of your face. And it's, with each out breath, it's gathering speed. It's going beyond the horizon into space, but I don't suggest you visualize the horizon or the earth or indeed planets or stars or anything like that. Just have a sense of it going out into space. And just gathering speed with every out breath, and your awareness is going out with it. You're getting a sense of boundless extension. So it can reach speeds way beyond the laws of physics. It's even going beyond the realm of the universe. It's going beyond the known universe and the unknown universe. And then as your awareness continues out like this on the breath, you become aware below you of a massive cosmic size cliff of infinite extent and infinite depth. And you just shoot out beyond it into what's beyond. Okay, and just return into the soma, the body. Okay, so I kind of threw that one in to give a different possible way into the sense of boundless space. And as I say, this is definitely a use of the imagination, but I found when I first did it, I got this one from Bridgie Ray. It definitely gave me a sense of boundless space, which I think wasn't necessarily the intent of the practice, but that's what it did for me. So any comments on that one? Did anyone find that a more useful way or a more useless way? For slightly deeper, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Tejananda, Sila Bodhi. I found that almost scarily effective. It was amazing. I mean, I was already shooting out endlessly and that was going well. And then when I went off the cosmic cliff, whoa! But it was fantastic actually, because as long as you weren't, if you were happy to stay with it, it really put you into, well, like nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It's quite effective. Yeah,
well, I say I've found it effective. So it's interesting. I mean, it's like what we can do with the imagination shouldn't be underestimated. Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for the soma, and I know I've been accused of not being being against the imagination, which is not true. But it's just like it's really kind of effective sometimes for some people. Not all the time for everybody. But yeah.
Tejananda?
Yes. Sandra. Yeah.
That's a more perfectly put version of how I imagine the perfect death.
Right. Yeah, could be. And was that all right?
Oh yes, very good.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah. I can see what you mean. I can also see why some people might find it quite scary and off-putting. Yeah. So, as they say, horses for courses.
Depends what you're approaching.
Yeah. Any other comments on that?
I found it a lot of fun. But there were two things. One thing was that I didn't get so much a sense of the dissolving boundaries between self and surroundings, because it was like when something moves, there has to be something there to move. And my experience of going over that edge was tumbling around, so quite an interesting sense of moving. There was definitely a self there to move.
Yeah.
And another thing was, do you have a tip for how to do it without, or I found I started controlling my breath a little bit.
Yeah.
Counter that?
I wouldn't, actually. In the case of this exercise, I think it's okay to have a sense of projecting your breath. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a more general point, but it's just like, we do have this kind of thing, don't manipulate your breath. But actually, there's also a thing, like pranayama and breathing methods, which do manipulate the breath and, do lead to very useful results. So it's just like being aware of when it's appropriate not to, let the breath be natural, and when it's appropriate, maybe to use a bit of kind of manipulation of the breath. So I think in the case of this kind of exercise, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but if you bring that back into practices where it does matter, then that's not so good. So it's just a question of discerning the difference. Yeah.
Hello, Satyadakani.
Hi.
Hi. I noticed that I was straining, and so I just let it go and went back to the body. Yeah, it reminded me a bit of the fifth stage of the Metabhavana, when you're kind of radiating metta to the whole universe.
Yeah.
Which I don't seem to take me away from my experience. So I tend to sort of stay in my body, and so it led to straining. So I just kind of abandoned it and came back to the sensations. Yeah.
I mean, as I say, these various methods, they're for you to look at and do and see what effect they have, which is the way the Dharma works. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
But I will say one thing regarding the radiation stage of the Brahmaviharas, which is a way in which we're told to radiate it as if it's going out. But the way in which I do it, and I often teach it in this way, is that you basically get a sense of the metta or whatever it may be. You let that infuse your whole being, so your whole body, and then all of your sense fields. You know, so in that sense, it's going out beyond the body into what you can see and hear. Yeah. And then you just let it become, you let go of any notion that it is bounded in some way in you, and you just immediately let it be boundless. And that takes you into what's called metta without an object, yeah, which means you're not radiating it. It's just that it's immediately all inclusive. It includes absolutely everything and everybody. So that is a way of doing it without radiating.
Yes, I think that's kind of what I figured out for myself in the fifth stage of the practice. So, but using my imagination in that way, it just kind of leads me to feel like I'm going to get a headache. So
yeah, well, it's quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anyone to get a headache.
No, but it's good to try, but I think not the right thing at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, and occasionally, in order to discover something, it is necessary to get a headache. Yeah, it's just like, oh, right, I tried that. I won't be doing that again in a hurry.
Yeah.
But preferably not. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Okay. Right. Now, Sila Bodhi, was you indicating? No? Okay. We'll just take this one little stage further then. So the next arupa sphere is boundless consciousness. Okay, so actually getting from boundless space or unbounded space into unbounded consciousness is much easier than you might think. So let's just do it. So again, we're doing the setting up bit much more briefly. So the initial just sitting, and then the grounding, lift, alignment and poise. And then sweeping through, letting go of holdings on. And letting the awareness take in the whole of the somatic body with the breathing. Just rest in that with minimal effort. And be aware of whether hindrances are happening or not. But I suggest for now, even if hindrances, hopefully mild ones, are happening, then you just stay with the overall sense of the somatic cloud. Maybe give a little bit more awareness to the breathing to just enable the mind to settle a bit more. Now start to get a sense of no bounds, no boundaries, in whatever way you find currently most helpful. And to whatever extent you find helpful. So the sense of space, and the sense of not finding bounds. So whether you're focusing on somatic space or a more imaginative sense of space, the soma, the sensations of the body, are still part of experience. So just acknowledge that. We're still focusing on the space. And then simply make a slight shift to be aware that this space is something you're conscious of. You are conscious of the space. Or let's just say there is consciousness of the space. So the experience of the space is inseparable from consciousness. You could say, well, consciousness extends as far as the space extends. So focus on the sense of the consciousness. Which is just as boundless as the sense of space was. Now, unlike space and any coarser objects, consciousness is not something that you can have as an object. You could say it's pure subjectivity. And yet, here it is, we are conscious, there is consciousness. And it doesn't have any bounds. Just be your own consciousness, which is effortlessly present. Okay, then relax back into something like ordinary experience, somatic experience. Okay, so that was very straightforward, wasn't it? Or was it? So any reports from the realms of consciousness?
Yes, Tejananda, can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. That was amazing.
Ah.
What about thought, though? There was still thought there. I got this idea, I don't know where from, that after a certain set of dhyanas, there's no thought.
Well, that applies to harder dhyana, let's say. It doesn't apply to soft dhyana. Yeah, so there will be thought, at least up to no thingness, which, by the way, we're not going to go into. There's just not time. There will be background thought going on, but there's still a sense of consciousness. You could say, actually, there's a subtle awareness of all the possible objects of consciousness going on, but it's like the focus is the consciousness itself.
I got a sense also of light, not as an idea, but the light and the sense of consciousness seem to be the same. Yeah. I mean, there often is. There are lots of references to light in the, in the various Buddhist teachings, and particularly, well, I mean, it's like
boundless space can seem to have a color, and so can boundless consciousness. And it's going to be different from different people at different times, so it's not like it has a color. I mean, you might be aware of those teachings from Milarepa about what color is the mind, what shape is the mind. Well, you can do those inquiries, but the thing is, it doesn't have a particular color, but it can have a sense of. It's sometimes talked of in terms of, well, there's the term prabhasvara, which means clear light, or is translated as clear light or just clarity. So that could be the quality that you're picking up on.
That feels right. Yeah.
Good.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, that's my favourite so far.
Right.
That sort of worked for me, yeah. The others were a bit not quite understanding them. Yeah. As soon as you said, instead of your consciousness, you said something like there is consciousnness. I got a hint of no selfness coming into that.
Right.
Which was interesting. And the extending of the consciousness, I felt it going out and then coming back in and sort of oscillating a bit like that.
Yeah, that's all good stuff.
It was all interesting stuff. So thanks. Yeah.
Okay, pleasure.
My observation or experience of this is that I find it easier to go into the sense of boundless awareness or consciousness than space.
Yeah.
It's like space is an idea imputed on top of the experience of boundless awareness or consciousness. So I have to do a little bit of translation to do that. So I've never quite understood why we sort of start off with the experience of space rather than consciousness in a way. I don't know if you got any sense of that.
I think generally, because I mean it's related to say there's rupa. The rupa dhyanas are rupa, and then there's also the kamaloka. So we've got the lokas, rupa loka, the kamaloka, the arupa loka. I mean these are I mean they're just ways of talking about modes of perception actually. So it's just like the sense of rupa is happening, like ordinary experience now is happening, visually. There's space and stuff in the space. So it would seem a natural progression to go into just the space from there. And then there's the consciousness of the space. And then there, when you go beyond that, nothingness or no thingness is the next natural step, because it's just like you've kind of, when you come into consciousness, boundless consciousness, space has gone. You've just got consciousness. And then you kind of notice that consciousness isn't conscious of anything. It's not, so there are no things. And that's how the progression goes. And then you notice that there's no consciousness. I noted in somewhere I was reading that the translation of the fourth arupa, neither perception nor non-perception, perception there, the word sanya, also means consciousness. So it could be understood as, there's neither consciousness nor not consciousness. And that is about as subtle as you can get on the phenomenal level. So there is a natural progression. It works the other way as well. We start with, perception comes in, in a sense, perception becomes, it perceives consciousness. Consciousness perceives space. Within space, there are objects, and in that way, we kind of go in the opposite direction and build up our sense of the world. In other words, all of these are constructs, and that's where the insight aspect comes in, because we can see that with each one, as you sort of go into more and more subtle constructs, until you get to the most subtle one of all, which is neither perception nor non-perception. Yeah, all the rest are clearly seen, if you look kind of, as it were, backwards, to be constructs, even consciousness. Yeah. So at that point, what's left? Open question.
Right, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Could you talk a little bit about awareness and consciousness, and are the two terms interchangeable, or what's the difference, or was there awareness in consciousness? I got a bit confused about that.
Yeah, fine. It's a good thing to get confused about because it is confusing, because different people use different terms in different ways around this. Now, at the moment, I'm using consciousness for Vijnana, which is the term in the term for that arupa. It's Vijnana. Now, I would say that Vijnana is, if you like, individual consciousness. It's the consciousness onto which is imputed a sense of a separation of subject and object, or self and other. Yeah. So it's fundamentally almost the same as awareness, because awareness is exactly the same thing. Awareness and consciousness both are the non-objective quality which knows whatever is arising. Yeah, but awareness is jnana. Yeah, and jnana is undivided, whereas consciousness is divided. Yeah, I go into all this sort of stuff on my thing called Simply Being. But basically, we're dealing here with consciousness rather than awareness. Although, if the sense of there being separation within that consciousness drops away, then it's awareness, it's jnana rather than vijnana. Does that make sense? Sort of. Yeah. But yeah, that's further than we can really go on this in the 10 minutes that are left. Yeah. Any other observations? I think we're not going to get any further into the insight aspect, but what I was going to do was simply, from any old dhyana actually, or even just access, and you can do this in your own time at home, quite safely. Just, in that current experience, when you've stepped out of whatever absorption you're in, well, firstly, just be aware it's gone, and then look for any immediate direct experience of permanence. Yeah, so we're dealing with the first lakshana. Yeah. Can you find any experience of permanence whatsoever? And before somebody comes up with this answer, we're talking about phenomenally. We're not talking about, as it were, noumenally. So we're not talking about awareness. We're talking about any phenomenon, any, if you like, any object of awareness or consciousness. Can you find unchangingness? Yeah. So it's like, obviously it's one of the first Buddhist teachings that anybody ever hears about, impermanence. Well, I know everything's impermanent, it's obvious, isn't it? Well, no, it's not until you've really, really looked and seen, because what we're holding on to is a sense of, things could potentially at least be permanent. Yeah. So we really need to thoroughly explore and find out for ourselves directly whether that is the case or not. Anyway, that's something that you might want to explore further, but any other yeah, we've got 9 minutes now. So any other questions or comments or observations?
I don't quite know if I can how to say this, but I did have I didn't feel particularly with it until we got to the consciousness bit, and then it felt like that became quite apparent. I had my eyes open, or maybe I had, I'm not sure if I had them open all the time. At certain points I had my eyes open, and then what then what became clear was it was seeing consciousness, or it was the same consciousness, but it was it was related to sense organ. Yes, I just wondered if you could say anything about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can explore it if you use the Yogacara model. You've got the 5 body sense consciousnesses, then you've got the mind consciousness, and each one can be experienced individually in relation to its object. Yeah, and then if you sort of head backwards, you might have that diagram that came up in relation to Sangharakshita's talk on the depth psychology of the Yogacara. It's quite a useful one. You've got next you've got what's called the Klishto Manovijnana, which is the afflicted mind consciousness, which is the same as Vijnana in the sense that I was just talking about it as dualistic. It's the consciousness which creates dualism. But if you kind of come back from that, you come into the Alaya Vijnana, which is actually, and again, Sangharakshita talks about the relative Alaya, which would still be Vijnana, and the absolute Alaya, which is Jnana, and that is, if you like, a fully awakened consciousness or fully awakened awareness. Yeah, so that's quite a useful little model from the Yogacara there.
So are you saying that within that little meditation that we just did, we can explore, if you like, the different ways that consciousness is being talked about?
Yeah. I mean, you can explore all of the individual sense consciousnesses, and then you can explore. Well, you can be aware of whether the Klishto is active or not. Yeah. And if it's not, there won't be any sense of separation. There won't be any subject and object. And from that, you can kind of rest back into the Alaya, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And it's just consciousness. And even there, you're noticing that there is this subtle tendency to create a subtle duality of subject and object. And if you can kind of step back from that, then it's jnana. It's just jnana. And then, as you know, the vijnanas all turn into jnanas, and that's where we get the sense of the 5 jnanas and the 5 Buddhas and the 5 female Buddhas and all of that. But actually, that's the realm of awakening, of awakened awareness, as I said. Time for one more, maybe. Okay, well, I think we're done in that case. So
can I just thank you before you go?
Of course.
Thank you very much, Tejananda. It's been a really great weekend. I feel quite galvanized by it personally. So I really want to thank you for your generosity in leading us in this weekend. Very open wholeheartedness. And also to thank Darren, who's been here at the centre doing all the techie stuff.
Yeah.
And Karen, who's been very helpful, doing a lot of the organising. They've both been the key organising people. So thank them both.
Yep, thank you.
Vajra Devi's reminding me to remind everyone that Dhyana is very much appreciated if you're in a position to give. Centre has still got loans that we're trying to pay off. So if you can't afford to, of course, that's fine. But we do welcome any Dhyana. Thank you again. Thank you again.
Okay, pleasure. It really has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tejananda.
One before you go, just mention. I'm going to do a bit of advertising here. So there are two themes coming up. I mean, we're now not doing any residential retreats for the rest of the year at Vajraloka, but in October we've got Simply Being as an online retreat, and we've got Compassion and Emptiness. Yeah. So I've mentioned both of those. So if you want to, if you're interested in coming in either of those or both, check out on the Vajraloka website.
Is there any way you could tell us a weeny bit about them now, please? Just a weeny bit.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the 5 Buddhas and the 5 wisdoms, and jnana and vijnana. That's kind of the area of simply being. Yeah. And compassion and emptiness explores the Brahmaviharas and then emptiness teaching. So, I mean, they're focusing on a lot of what we've done this weekend, but from different, various different perspectives. And, the whole approach, I always start with a somatic approach. So, it will be very embodied, all of it. But, if you want to know more, just read the blurbs on the website. Oh, and also on the Vajraloka Facebook group. So if you're not in that, and if you're on Facebook, do join the group. Anyway, it's been great being with you for the last 2 days, and hope to see you around sooner or later.
Thank you very much, Tejananda.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Really, really
Thank you very much.
That was great.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic, Tejananda. Really good weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
And thank you, Prabhakari, too.
Yes, thank you, Prabhakari, and Karen and Darren. Yeah, very, very much.
Absolutely.
Sadhu.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Tejananda and Shrewsbury. Bye-bye.